The date was November 25th, 2009, at approximately 4 p.m., and inside of one of Utah's most famous caves, a heart-pounding rescue operation was underway. Dozens upon dozens of rescuers surrounded the mouth of the cave, all having received a call that a man was trapped deep inside the cave. And right now, the race is currently on to rescue this man before it's too late. The man in question, John Edward Jones, was currently trapped in a 10 by 18 inch hole that dropped at a dangerous 70-degree angle.
Being stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
Over 100 rescuers are currently on site, but only one could reach John at any given time. The rescue workers' last hope of getting John out of his tight prison is a rigged pulley system that took almost 19 hours to construct, but by now, time was quickly running out for John. As such, I have to warn you guys that this is a miserably tragic story, and it's not for those with people who suffer from claustrophobia. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Rewinding History. Cave exploring, or more commonly known in the United States as spelunking, is an activity in which thrill seekers dare to explore the deep depths of the earth created by Mother Nature herself. But just like with any other thrill-seeking activity, caving always comes with its risks, and certain rules must be followed if one is to have fun exploring these deep crevices. Whether you're a newcomer or an experienced caver, these rules still must be followed, because one of the simplest mistakes that breaks one of these rules could lead to dire consequences. On November 24th, 2009, 26-year-old John Edward Jones, his wife Emily Jones, and their 1-year-old daughter Elizabeth Jones traveled down from their home in Virginia down to Stansbury Park, Utah, so they could visit John's family for Thanksgiving. And around this point in his life, John was 26 years old, a devout Christian, and studying at the University of Virginia with the hope of graduating and becoming a pediatric cardiologist. For those of you who don't know, they're people who are specialized in working with children. John had been married to Emily for quite some time. They already had their 1-year-old daughter, and they were expecting another child around June of 2010. And on November 24th, because he was out of school, John, his wife, and their 1-year-old daughter traveled down to Utah so they could visit John's family for Thanksgiving and spend some quality time together. As soon as the trio arrived, John's family told them that to celebrate Thanksgiving, they were all going to go caving, which is something that John and his 23-year-old younger brother, Josh, did when they were kids, while accompanied by their father, Leon. The cave the family decided to explore was a very popular cave located in the Utah desert named Nutty Putty Cave. This cave, being discovered in 1960 by Dale Green, was notorious for its many small passageways. Despite this, however, the cave was labeled as a beginner's cave, but between 1999 and 2004, that statement would be called into question when 4 people, including 2 Boy Scouts and a teenager, became stuck in the tighter portions of the cave, needing rescue from professionals. It was because of these high-profile incidents that in 2007, the cave entrance was gated and inaccessible to the public. But the public fought back, however, and 2 years later, in May 2009, the cave was reopened, but this time with a reservation system. And on that reservation, it said that you have to file for a permit 28 days before your visit, and you have to have at least 4 members in your group, and 2 of those members have to be, quote, experienced cavers. Now Josh was the one who filed this permit, and he labeled him and John as the experienced cavers because they went caving since they were kids. But the thing is, they haven't been caving in a long time. But Josh didn't seem too worried about this, and at approximately 7:25 p.m., John, Josh, and 9 other friends and family members traveled down to Nutty Putty Cave. But Emily and Elizabeth stayed behind, not only so that Emily could look after Elizabeth, but also so that she could hang out with her in-laws. At around 8 p.m., the entire family entered the cave and began exploring the cave's largest chamber, which is known as the Big Slide. This is a giant room that descends at a 45-degree angle, and the only thing that keeps you from not only falling but also helps you travel up and down the slide is a rope attached on both ends. At first, everything went pretty well. The family was having fun, and John took the time to pose for a photo. But an hour into their expedition, things would take a turn for the worst.
The closest I could get basically was just seeing his two feet kind of eaten up by that little crevice. I couldn't see his body at all.
At around 9 p.m., John, Josh, and 2 other friends split off from the rest of their group, challenging each other to try and find one of the most notorious sections of the cave, which was known as the Birth Canal. Well, technically, what we all call the Birth Canal is actually named the Aorta Crawl, and this is evident if you look at the cave's map. So for now, I'm actually going to call it the Aorta Crawl. The Aorta Crawl is a very, very long, tight stretch of tunnel that one of a certain size can be able to crawl through. But eventually, it does open up into a small room so you can turn around and head back through it. The pair of 4 decided to split into 2 groups, the 2 friends going one way and John and Josh going the other. With John in front, the 2 made their way down to the bottom of the big slide and started crawling through a slanted corridor, and eventually they reached an area which was known as the pit, and right there in front of John were 2 holes, both of them splitting into 2 different directions. John, seeing both of the holes as viable options to lead to the birth canal, chose to go down one of them, and his brother followed suit. The hole John decided to go down was this one, and with Josh right behind him, the 2 started to slowly make their way down the tunnel with the hope of finding the Aorta Crawl. At some point during their journey, John came across a small tunnel, which fit the description of the Aorta Crawl perfectly, so he entered in it while Josh stayed behind and watched as his brother disappeared into the tight crevice. As John continued into the tight tunnel, it curved upwards, but then at some point, it curved downwards at about a 45-degree angle. At this point, John was starting to get a little worried, but his mind kept telling him, "Keep going. This is the Aorta Crawl. If you keep pushing, you'll reach the other side, and you'll be able to turn around afterwards." But at some point during John's journey, he came across a lip of rock that kind of cut off his path. But knowing that this was the Aorta Crawl, he sucked out all the air in his chest and squeezed himself over the lip of rock and down into a 10-inch wide side of the crevice. But as he kept going, the tunnel again curved downwards, but this time at a 70-degree angle. But John just kept pushing forwards. But then his chest expanded again as he breathed in, and he got stuck. Unfortunately for John, the tunnel he had squeezed into did not actually open up, but instead, it dead-ended. John now found himself trapped in a fissure that is 10 by 18 inches in diameter. To put that into perspective, John is stuck in a hole that's the same size as the opening of a front-loading washing machine. And on top of all of this, he is stuck upside down at a dangerous angle of 70 degrees. Realizing his predicament, John tried to wiggle himself out of the hole he was stuck in, but in doing so, he slipped further down into the passage and now got his head trapped in an area that was only 8 inches wide. One arm was pinned underneath him, the other was forced backward by an outcropping of rock, and his headlamp was also knocked off. It was at this point that John began yelling out to his brother and telling him that he was stuck. Upon hearing his older brother's cries for help, Josh immediately started down the passageway he saw his brother disappear into. But when he was crawling through it, he eventually found himself stuck in a section called the corkscrew, which was this windy bit of tunnel that eventually takes a 90-degree turn. And from where he was stuck, he could barely see 6 inches of his brother's feet sticking out of a tight opening at the very bottom of the tunnel. And Josh knew that if he was stuck right here, then John, all the way down at the bottom of the tunnel, was really, really stuck. Josh eventually managed to free himself and crawl down to his brother, and for several minutes they desperately tried to get him out, but to no avail. It was at this point that both brothers realized that they needed help from professionals. So Josh exited the cave and went to a nearby hill to get reception and call 911, but not before alerting the rest of the family of John's predicament. Knowing help was on the way, Josh went back down into the cave so he could visit his brother. It was at this point that both parties realized their blunder. It turns out the brothers had taken a wrong turn and ended up in a different section of the cave, which was known as Ed's Push, and John was currently stuck in a tunnel that wasn't fully mapped at the time. While the brothers waited for the rescue to arrive, they passed the time by singing religious hymns and keeping conversation with each other, but it would be 3 hours until rescue would arrive. At 12 a.m., the very first rescuer arrived on scene. It was Susie Matola, and she immediately headed into the cave. It took her 30 minutes to reach John's position, but when she did, she realized that John's predicament was much worse than she had originally thought. But she knew that she had to keep John calm for the time being, so she greeted herself. "Hi John, my name is Susie. How's it going?" John's reply sounded distant. "Hi Susie, thanks for coming, but I really want to get out." "Oh, no worries, John. We're going to get you out of here lickety-split." But after taking a couple moments to analyze the situation, she knew that it was not going to be easy to do so. She stayed with John for a long time and tried many different methods to get him out, including cutting off part of his jeans to free up some room and tying a rope around his ankles and attempting to pull him out. Neither of them were really successful. After 2 whole hours, she was exhausted and she was forced to crawl out of the cave, and by this point, 30 rescuers had arrived on scene. Susie was then met by on-site drama surgeon Doug Murdoch. Susie informed him of John's situation, and then Murdoch informed everyone that John would not have much time to live. Being upside down is very dangerous for a human body. The heart works with the force of gravity so it can pump blood throughout your entire body. But if you're upside down, a couple things happen. First of all, blood, rather than kind of pooling in your feet, is now pooling in your head, so the heart has to work twice as hard to pump it out of your brain and into your feet, so it can keep the blood going. Now the heart is designed to do this, partially. It's designed to do it for a couple hours, but eventually it cannot hold it any longer and it can go into cardiac arrest. And John has already been upside down for 4 hours at this point, so the heart is already starting to lose some hope. And also being upside down, your organs are pressing up into your chest and are kind of smushing against your lungs, which makes it harder for you to take a deep breath. And toxins build up in your blood, so if they take him out at the wrong angle or take him out too fast, those toxins can rush to his heart and kill him just like that. So they realize that they have to act quickly and get John out of his dangerous position as quickly as they can. Now knowing John's time crunch, the team immediately began brainstorming many ideas on how to get John out of his tight crevice. Some of which included lubricating the walls with oil and breaking John's legs, but both of the ideas were rejected, and instead, the team decided on rigging a pulley system made out of climbing cams in order to hoist him out of his hole. The team had high hopes that this pulley system would work because just a few years earlier in 2004, when Brock Clark got stuck in the cave, he was rescued using a similar pulley system, and better yet, he got stuck in the corkscrew, which is just a few meters away from where John was currently stuck. And if they were able to get him out of the corkscrew area, then they were pretty certain that they were going to be able to get John out of his fissure. The plan for the pulley system goes as follows. They would drill holes into the rock, anchor the climbing cams into the rock, run a rope through the cams, tie it around John's legs, and a team of 8 stationed in the pit will lightly tug on the rope inch by inch and slowly but surely lift him out of the crevice. But this was easier said than done. One of the main problems was their working conditions. Because of the tight tunnel John was stuck in, only one rescuer could reach John at a time and start drilling the rock. And it was because of this that it would take a long time to drill for one person to drill through the rock. But the bigger problem was the rock itself. Nutty Putty Cave was named Nutty Putty because the deeper you go into the cave walls slowly get softer and softer, and you can eventually work it through your fingers kind of like putty. And it was because of this that it did take a while to get a good hole going. And because of their working conditions, they couldn't bring these giant drills and lightly drill through the rock. They had to bring small drills and chisels and slowly chip away at the rock. And it was because of this that one rescuer later quoted, "It took him 1 whole hour just to drill through 6 inches of rock." The rescuers now knew that it was going to take a long time to set up the pulley system, and John would be alone for most of that time. So in order to cheer his spirits up, they made a rescuer stay with John for the entire time the pulley system was being constructed. This man was named Ryan Schertz, and as soon as he entered the cave and reached John, the two instantly bonded. The two spent hours talking about their religions and Spanish-speaking abilities. It was also during this time that a two-way cable radio was brought down into the crevice so John could speak with his pregnant wife, who was now currently on site as the pulley system was being constructed. By 4 p.m., the pulley system was finally ready to go. And by this point, John had been trapped upside down for 19 hours. And he was already starting to feel the effects of being upside down for this long amount of time. The blood pooling in his head, his organs pressing up against his lungs, and his blood pressure rising. Even though stuff was starting to look down for John, at least the pulley system was finally ready to go. Susie and a team of 8 others stationed themselves in the pit and grabbed hold of the rope, while Ryan, on the other hand, stayed right behind John while he also grabbed hold of the rope, just to relay back to the team to see if John was doing alright with each tug they did. Susie gave a count from 1 to 3, and the entire team pulled on the rope. John slowly inched out of the crevice, but he started screaming in pain, so Ryan told them to halt so they can give John some time to rest. Now I gotta explain why this is so painful for John. Because he's been upside down for this long amount of time, blood has not been able to get to his feet. And the rope was tied around his ankles. So every time they put pressure on his feet or ankles, because no blood was able to get to his feet, he was screaming in pain at the pressure he felt in his feet. So they let John rest for around 20 minutes to give him some time to relax. And by the time 20 minutes was up, the team gave another tug on the rope. And again, he inched slowly out of the crevice. But they again halted to give John some time to rest. And then they pulled again for a third time. And by this time, Ryan was finally able to make eye contact with John. And he said that his eyes were red from crying, his face was dirty, but at least he had a smile on his face. Ryan then asked John, "How are you doing?" And John replied, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down. My legs are killing me." Even though he heard John complaining, he still kept a smile on his face. So he gave the go-ahead for the team to pull a 4th time. And by the 4th pull, John's feet actually collided with the tunnel's low ceiling. Like I said before, because blood was not able to get to his feet, he screamed in pain. So Ryan told the team to lower John a little bit, and they did so, relieving the pressure on his feet. It was at this point that the team came to a horrible realization. Because of the angle of the tunnel he slipped into, they were not going to be able to bend John's feet backwards without breaking his legs. But because of how long he's been down here and how weak he was, the shock has a high chance of killing him. And the cams anchoring the pulleys were actually already starting to slowly slip from the sooty cave walls. But Ryan still had hope. He knew that John still had a chance of being able to get out. So after resting for around another 20 minutes, they gave another tug on the rope. But then, disaster struck.
That they have a raising system that was helping to hold him in position. One of the devices as part of that system failed, and Mr. Jones actually ended up falling back into the area where he had been stuck for so long.
A natural arch that sat right above John, where part of the rope wrapped around, shattered. This caused one of the climbing cams it was attached to fly off and smack Ryan right in the face, which knocked him unconscious. The entire team in the pit fell backwards as to the sudden loss of tension in the rope. When Ryan finally regained consciousness, he realized that something terrible had happened. His jaw was broken and his tongue was sliced almost in half. But then, Ryan realized that something more terrible has just happened. John has slipped right back down into the crevice that he had been stuck in for so long. Ryan then quickly realized the severity of the situation and knew that he had to get out of the cave as soon as possible. So he informed John about this and told him that he will send down a replacement as soon as he can. So he left the cave and with the help of a couple other people, went down to the hospital to get treated for his injuries. And the replacement he sent down to John was his own father, Dave Schertz. When he finally reached John, he heard that his breathing was muffly, gurgly, but at least he was still alive. So he tried to keep a conversation with John, but during the entire thing, he kept on asking Dave if Ryan was alright. Dave then did something very crazy. He managed to somehow squeeze himself into the crevice with his arms fully extended and managed to tie a rope around John's waist. But in doing so, he got himself stuck. He thrashed and squirmed, tried to get out of the crevice, but to almost no avail. For 15 minutes he did so before he finally managed to free himself, but sustained some injuries in the process, and then realized that he also had to leave the cave. So he sent down yet another replacement, Brandon Cornwallis. He entered into the passage feet first, and when he reached John, he kept on trying to get a word out of him, but to no avail. He then realized that John, still alive, was unconscious. Despite this, he brought down the two-way cable radio into the crevice so Emily, who was still on site at this point, could speak with John. She still believed that John could still survive the ordeal, so she said to him, "I know you've been pushing so hard for so long. Why don't you rest for a minute and take a break, and then you can push again." Brandon eventually left the crevice and stationed himself in the pit along with a couple other people. There, they discussed their current options. But by now, the entire team was exhausted, John was barely breathing, and no one really knew what to do. By 11:30 p.m., with everyone already suspecting that the worst had happened to John, the rescue team had called in a paramedic to head down into the cave. But just in case he couldn't arrive, the team sent Brandon into the crevice with a stethoscope and thermometer. As soon as he reached John, he shoved the stethoscope into John's torso as far up as he could go, but he didn't hear any distinct pulse. He then proceeded to take off John's boots and put the thermometer up against his feet. But the thermometer did not read anything. This was because his feet were colder than the lowest temperature reading on the thermometer. By the way, if you would like to learn more about Brandon Cornwallis' side of the story, I will include a link to his website in the description below. Eventually, the paramedic did reach the cave, and as soon as he entered into the cave and reached John, he took a pulse from the leg and officially confirmed what everyone had suspected. At 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, 2009, John Edward Jones was pronounced dead almost 27 hours after he had first gotten stuck. Emily was in complete disbelief. She refused to accept the fact that her husband could die from such a simple mistake, and did not accept the fact that a pulse taken from the leg, an area where no blood could currently get at the moment, could indicate that he was really dead. But the officials managed to calm her down by telling her that they would do everything in their power to remove her husband's body and give him a proper burial. A couple days after the incident, many officials discussed several plans on how to get John's body out of the cave, but they quickly realized that doing so would be almost impossible to achieve, at least keeping his body intact. Even if they were able to get his body out of the crevice, it would be almost impossible to maneuver him through the many twists, turns, and tight corridors of the cave. And so, it was officially decided that they would seal the entrance of the cave with concrete, with John's body still trapped in the crevice. The first thing they did was seal off the entrance to Ed's Push, and then once that was done and everyone exited the cave, they sealed the entrance with several feet of concrete, which would prevent anyone from ever getting inside the cave, and now officially turning the cave into John's tomb. Not too long after John's death, his family would release a statement in which they would say that John would be remembered for his, quote, good nature, delightful sense of humor, strong work ethic, a genuine love of people, a masterful ability to relate to children, a love of and unwavering faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and his commitment to his family as an amazing husband, father, son, and brother. Emily originally found it hard to move on, but she eventually did, and in 2010, she gave birth to John's eventual child, and she named him after his father. In 2012, she eventually remarried to a man named Donovan Sanchez, and to this day, the family is still going strong. To this day, John still rests inside of the cave, and John's family commissioned a plaque at the entrance of the cave to keep John alive in everyone's memories.